So welcome to this. I'm glad you all answered my call. I wasn't expecting such a powerful response. I'm really thrilled to see everyone show up for this. For the first couple of minutes, I'll probably be a bit less coherent because I'm very stressed right now. I really want to deliver that content to you. But as we get into it, I'll get more comfortable and we can kick this to high gear. So my name is Simon. If you don't know me, I'm from Montreal. I've been a marketer for 7 years now, worked in the business world for a while, done all of the possible positions. And I've been working for a brand that sells, for a microbrewery chain that works primarily in Canada, but also in France. And I've done a bunch of questions. Thank you, Dana. So I've done a bunch of tests, and I've run a bunch of advertising, and I've ran successful campaigns for the last couple of weeks. And I wanted to use that knowledge that I've got, and I wanted to share it to everyone in our dance world because it's really hard to know where to go right now because this is not the regular. This is not something that we're used to. It's new situation, right? So by having some insight, my objective, my end goal would be for us to act as a community, all play in this together and try to communicate within at least the same main guidelines that I will provide. Hopefully that's the end game, or at least if you understand what the bigger picture is, you can take decisions based on that and at least understand what the other people are doing. So that's the objective behind this. So without further ado, I will connect the presentation and we can kick it off. Here we go. If you can't see the screen, let us know in the comments, in the chat. And Isabel is our moderator for the day, right behind you right there. I think you guys can still see me on the corner. Everyone can see my screen. Excellent. So, welcome to this. I'll first start by giving you a little bit of a guide for how to look at this webinar that I put together for you. Something that I've seen from a lot of teachers that I felt was very interesting would be to come with a cup empty, right? Because there's a bunch of things that we'll review that might look like it's basics, but basics are kind of important right now. So make sure you come with your cup empty to make sure that it makes more sense in the end. Make sure to keep a positive attitude because this is something that's been, difficult to get in the last couple of weeks. And this whole plan and strategy is geared toward a positive attitude in our market. So make sure that you keep that positive mindset in your questions and when you think about things. I know we want to think about the worst case scenario, but there's a way to see it in a positive way, right? Feel free to express your concerns. I won't stop every time there's a question in the chat, but Isabel will periodically tell me when someone has a question, especially if there's big question marks as we go, and I'll do my best to answer to the best of my knowledge. A lot of the content in this is for understanding purpose because we need to understand the whole situation to be able to better make a strategy. So you won't necessarily need to take notes about everything. Just know that everything will be available after this. I have a group that I've created where you'll be able to join, where you can find all of the content that I'll have today, the video from this. You'll be able to find the tools that I'll be providing and the presentation itself. The reason why I wanted to have that group is for people to be able to ask questions afterwards. And as the situation evolve, I might want to add some precisions and give a little bit more insight on the curves of what's going to happen, because this is a situation that's going to be changing for a little while. So I'll put that all available at the end. And know that I will flag the key content. When I think that something is very important, I'll make sure that you know about it. Any questions before we start?
David Moody, que c'est un groupe de Bruce.
Correct. I've seen that in the Royston intensive, I just had to say. Good. Let's kick it off. So this presentation is split into 3 buckets. The first one will be to better understand the situation. Like I said, I think I can hear someone. Make sure your mics are turned off. There's going to be a discussion part at the end where we're going to be able to open the mics, but in the meantime, just make sure your microphones are off. First part will be to better understand the situation, what's happening, and what it means to be in a pandemic into our dance world. The second part will be how to use that knowledge to build a strategy and activate it. So how to use the power of the knowledge to kickstart our events and make sure that we can start communicating again. And then I have pertinent questions that I want to ask at the end. I've invited a lot of our key players in our community because I want to make sure that they have something to say in that discussion. I want to make sure that we can hear them because, you know, they've been there for a while and they can help us do that community movement and be together in this, right? So let's begin. The understand part. So the key ideas we'll be looking at today will be the concept of mental map, our social concept, context, sorry about that, the branding impact, the COVID fatigue movement that's happening right now, and we'll tackle that new normal buzzword that everybody's talking about and try to make some sense out of it because everybody talks about it. Nobody has been defining it very clearly. So I'll try to do that as much as possible in a marketing perspective. Good. Let's go over the basics of social media. Won't spend a lot of time on this, but just wanted to remind everyone that a system, you know, social medias are a system of connections facilitating communications, and they are based on common interests. So choosing the right ones for your system, for your organization, if you're a dance professional, if you're an event director, if you manage local dance groups, if you're a teacher, if you have a dance school, make sure that, you know, you take some time to assess if the medias you're using are still pertinent and if there's new ones that you could get. Just as a reminder, Facebook is based on community building. It manages a lot of the event stuff very well. A lot of information goes through Facebook. People go to it for information, see articles, they connect on it on a regular basis. Facebook has been made to create interactions. So keep that in your mind when you want to create some content. If you're looking for interactions, Facebook is probably the way to go, right? Two things I wanted to add. The negative part of using Facebook is that it's losing momentum. So that's why we need to make sure we pair it with a second platform. And Facebook pages, organic reach is kind of down because of the algorithm that Facebook has implanted in it, which means usually you'd have to pay to reach more people. So it needs to have a strategy where you use normal profiles and a national or Facebook page for your event just to make sure that you have maximum reach. Yes. Can everyone hear me? If you can't hear me properly, I've been told that my sound has been choppy. If you can't hear me properly, just drop a little line in the chat to Isabel. I'll see what I can do on my end about it. Oh, maybe that's. What does it look like? So I changed the parameter.
Sound is good. Seems to be good for everyone.
Okay. So, okay, I changed the parameters of my mic so that it doesn't pick up the whole room, but it only picks up my voice. So hopefully that's going to fix it. Going to leave some time for my computer to, you know, load this, make sure that. Okay, good. So let's move on to the next bucket, Instagram. The focus of Instagram is brand awareness. So making sure that people see you. It's very visual, based on images and videos. It's good for the informative side as well because the information goes fast. You can look at a feed and you can see all the, you know, the important information. That's why people use Instagram. The stories enable a different level of reach that's very instant, right? That's a very useful tool for Instagram. Instagram's down points would be the lack of interactions potential, which means contrarily to Facebook that, you know, is based on interaction. Instagram and side, you know, unless getting likes is what you want, it won't necessarily drive people to your pages and the interaction level is fairly low. So this is more for brand awareness, very important. Second thing I'd like you to know is there's a lot of fake profiles. So as you're building your Instagram pages, that might be a bit upsetting. It's part of it. It happens. There's ways to work around it. Ask me about it if you have any questions. Third bucket would be YouTube for the dance world specifically, because there's more. There's LinkedIn, there's a bunch of them, right? But I want to tackle the biggest ones in our dance world. YouTube is good for community because it stimulates interactions, and the content that's on it is based on community anyways. So usually it's dancing videos. It's rare that you see something else on there. So that's why it's based on community. The visibility it has is very important because it's been used for a while, and it's a very good media for that. And it's also good because it stays long term. Your content stays on a longer term, and that's something that's good to develop your brand image and you know, develop a certain powerful image through the dance community. The only problems I can see with YouTube is that there's no previews on Facebook, which means if you want to go multi-platforms, you have to choose if you want to have something that doesn't create as much of an interaction, or if you want to go native, which is to post your videos directly to Facebook, to be able to have that conversion happening. The second thing is content is time consuming because everything is video. And if any of you do videos, you'll know video takes a lot of time. So that's why you have to be careful in choosing YouTube to make sure that you have the people working on it, because then it can become a dead channel. And since you want to choose only two, if it's a dead channel, it's not necessarily helpful to you. Last bucket I wanted to go to is TikTok, because it's been all over the place, especially in the dance community. This is the new hot thing right now. It's been there for a while, of course, but you know, in the confinement parameters, people starting using TikTok because it's a platform that's based on creativity and content. So it's good for visibility. Just one thing to think about is your demographics, because this one is based towards a younger audience. I know that there's, you know, a lot of dancers that move to it, so that's why it might be interesting, but just keep in mind that it's a younger audience that's using TikTok, and it's an unknown future because the platform is there. Will it come up and fall down right away? Will they implement more business-oriented options for marketers? We don't know yet. So from there, you see all the buckets, the basics have been covered. You want to choose two of them because most of the time, unless you have a huge team working behind you, it's hard to tackle more than that. If you tackle too many buckets at the same time, it's going to be hard to give a clear content. All right, any questions, Isabel? All right, let's move to the next step. So what I wanted to look at with you guys, if this can just switch, is the concept of a mental map. A mental map is, because from there we'll be going into less basic content. A mental map is the top businesses and organizations or brand names that come top of mind when someone has a need for something. So if I ask a question to anyone in there, maybe you can answer the chat. If I ask, where do you go to have your tires changed? Then a bunch of people would answer based on their local areas for the top 3 things that come into their minds. What are the answers that we're getting? Canadian Tires. I don't know if you guys in the USA know what that is, but it's the place. It's the place for everything. A lot of people mentioned local shop when I asked that question. Flor says that Philippe changes the tires, which is also accurate, but he's part of the mental map. See? Good job. From there, what's interesting is that I've asked that question in a training with one of our locations at work. And although they had a local place right across the street that changes tires, they named the Canadian Tire that was 15 minutes up because that was top of mind, even though there was something right in front, right? So that's how powerful a mental map is. So I want to define it a little bit more. Basically, a mental map will use social medias to, or you can use social medias to introduce your brands, or to, you know, remind people that your brand exists. Brand here could be someone as a dancer, as dance school, could be an event. When I talk about organizations, that's what I mean. So basically, you want to use your social media to be able to establish a link within a mental map. So on your right, you can see, I don't know if it's on the right side. So on your right, you should see that, you know, our customer is looking for a lawnmower. And then there's a bunch of things that come to mind. Amazon, because Amazon comes to mind to everything now. It's the default for everything. And so basically by using social medias, a place that sells lawnmowers would be able to eventually make its way into the general vicinity of the mental map of a customer. you want to be able to get about 3 views to stay stuck into someone's mind. If people see you only once, there's very little chance that they'll remind it. What I also want to pinpoint is that you can see that there's no link established. People know you exist, but they haven't tried your service. They're not sure of who you are. They just know that this exists. So it's latent in there. To be able to create that link, we're going to look at brand sentiment. So I wanted to introduce a little character here. His name is Keith, right? Keith loves to go to Starbucks. And on your right, you can see Starbucks mental map. So they've developed a bunch. Did someone say hi, Keith?
Can you?
Nope, not necessarily. It's not been designed to look like someone. How hard is it when you have so many people in a chat to find someone that doesn't, you know, an icon that doesn't look like anyone? It's almost impossible. So don't take it personal if it looks like you. I just put it out there, all right? So you can see on the right all the little aspects why we recognize Starbucks, right? So as we look into Keith a little bit more, Keith has some basic values and principles. He's sophisticated. He likes the rewards. He enjoys quality materials and stuff. He's a little bit pretentious, as you can see with the little beard thing going on. And he loves to own a MacBook Pro, which is usually something that happens with people at Starbucks. Sorry, Keith. So basically, those are things. What? Yeah, and Isabel's like behind me, and she's saying, I have a MacBook. And she also goes to Starbucks. So just proving my point. Anyways, so you can see here that those values are found within Starbucks branding, which means Keith really likes to go and get a coffee over there because it fits with his personality, right? All basic stuff, but I want to make sure that's all fresh for what we're going to be looking at in the future. So now that we know this, I'd like to introduce Steve. Steve has a mask because he's part of that new reality right now. Steve wants to buy a lawnmower. He values cheap products, but yet powerful. He likes when it's loud, efficient, reliable, and he likes to get good service for his equipment. So we can see that in that lawnmower industry, the local lawnmower shop, if he's able to vehicle those values within its social medias, will eventually create a link between Steve in mind. Sorry about that. You know, sometimes I have French going on at the same time as English in my head, so that sometimes gets a little bit weird. So basically, using those values in the social medias will enable your shop or the local lawnmower shop in this case to, you know, become a part of the mental map, and eventually he's going to try it. He's going to try and go. He's going to reach out and buy some stuff over there and try it. All right. So that's how you make your place into the mental map. Your objective is to stay in there as well. So once you're there, it doesn't mean that people will forget. It doesn't mean that people will always remind you there. Some other brands can take over. So that's why you want to make sure on social medias that you're constant and constantly reminding people that you exist, right? Yes. Yeah, the mask has been created by Jenny. So if you have any questions about masks, you know, on our Canadian side, you can always reach out to her. Thanks. Very nice design. Good. Moving on. Any questions about this so far? I think you guys will just ask the questions as we go, right? Good. So I want now to look a little bit on the social context that we have, because this will impact the mental map, or actually the core values of people, which means it will impact the mental map, and it impacts all of our businesses, which is what created that, you know, shit show that's happening right now, where we don't know where we should be looking at, what we should be doing, right? So the principal social factors here will be the health risk, because it, you know, it comes across as a threat, the economic crash or potential crash, which comes as a very stressful item for people. The constant death reminders. I get on my phone 3 times a day a reminder that people are dying on a regular basis. This is very stressful. The constant stress reminders, like about the economics, the news, it's all over the place, right? The political debates and the government trust that's being, you know, pushed in every country, no matter where you're from. The individual responsibility that becomes, you know, that has a spotlight right now, and the personal opinions and fake news that seems to be something that's very challenging between people, because facts are being challenged. So it creates some kind of tension online, right? So I want to take a minute to really understand what people are going through when a pandemic or a situation like this happened. I want to put it as simple as possible. So The first level would be the assessment, which is something that happened at the beginning of the year where the government tells us that, you know, a virus is showing up and we have to start reacting. Usually they won't just start right away. They have to make sure that people are aware that something is happening, and awareness is the first step. Because if not all of the population is aware that something's happening, then your movement is going to be all over the place. The second part would be desensitization. I probably say that wrong. I'm sorry. At least it'll stay in your mind. This is where the government is starting to take actions, where you have to start to take actions. This is where habits are changing. This is the hard part. This is the big part of it, because this is where people's habits change. This is a very important part, because this is something we were going through like in the last couple of weeks, last month or so, and that's what's been influencing. Because if people have to think about their new habits, they can't think about dancing, they can't think about, you know, the fun stuff. They have to get aligned first. The third thing that will happen eventually, slowly, as we go out of sensitization, is habits. People will build habits, get used to the new normal, get used to it, and they will start looking into building their own regular stuff again, right? And then usually we'll fall into another assessment, which is, especially in a case like in the pandemic, there's new information coming in every day, and it will eventually maybe tackle the habits that we already developed, maybe sometimes because we can start going out again, maybe because we have to go back because the confinement has to start all over again. So usually it goes into a circle like this, assessment, sensitization, habits, and this is how it goes, and this is how the government understands it too, and that's how they communicate and make sure that you know what's happening and that you're reacting to it. So the next thing I want to make sure that we understand is that it creates certain movements of emotions that are important for you to understand when you're creating your content. Because if you don't take that into consideration, you'll post about your event that you're selling tickets, but everybody has to stay confined, so they'll take it personal. They won't understand where you're standing. Why are you doing this? And because basically it's not your fault. It's just because this is where they are in your mind because of the, situation. So assessment usually creates fear because we fall in the unknown, things we don't know how long it's going to last and all of that. Eventually in the sensitization, we'll see doubt, we'll see anger because it changes your habits. You don't know how to adapt. You have to, look into it. It takes part of your life away a little bit for a little while. That creates that feeling of doubt and anger. And eventually when it moves into the habits section, you'll start to see acceptance. People will accept what's happening. And this is where we really can start to build. And then it will start to go into fear again when there's assessment. But of course, when it's something that we already know and it's only added information, the fear part becomes a lot less violent, let's put it this way. And as we better understand the pandemic, the fear will be less and less powerful. I see that we might have a question.
Just noticed this t-shirt. Love it. Nice t-shirt.
Yeah, I'll at the break, I'll change t-shirts. Let's make sure I cover a bit more events. All right, so that being said, I wanted to share a couple of informations that I found as I've been going through articles and webinars. So there's a ton of information. Most of it is irrelevant for most people. It's just for big brands, but I wanted to highlight the things that I found that would be useful for you guys. First thing that we've learned is that content is down because brands don't know what's good content and what it means to consumer anymore. So instead of trying to throw a bunch of stuff, they needed the market to stabilize a little bit. So which is a normal thing. And you've seen this in dance as well. All the events, all the schools, everybody just stopped posting. The only things we've seen is basic need to know data, right? Second thing is views are going up because people have more time and look for information and entertainment, which means, you have nothing else to do. You just pop on your phone, and screen time for kids must be terrible right now. Anyways, it's bad for me. I can tell you that much. Third thing I've noticed is engagement levels are very stable, and that's true even if the content has been going down, which is good news because people seems to be interacting with the posts. So that's something worth mentioning. I'm pretty sure most of the events don't necessarily use ad spending, sometimes because they don't understand it, sometimes because it requires budget, which is something that we don't necessarily have. I just wanted to place it out there for people that use it, that the ad spending has been dropping by 45% in Canada, 33% in the USA. Concretely, the next information you see under is things that I've noticed on my side. My advertising went from 56 cents to $1.64 to under 20 cents, which is huge. It means that reaching someone costs a fraction of the cost that it would normally cost, which means that's very interesting, because if we want to reach out to people, it means that it would cost less. So $50 would enable you to reach 3, 4, 5,000 people like overnight if you want to vehicle your message. So keep that in mind. If you have to vehicle a message that's important, maybe sometimes using ads, you know, could become something interesting, at least for now, because it's something that's going to eventually go back up to what it used to be, but not for the next 6 months. Yes. Acronyms, okay, good. CPM means cost per million. So, which means this is something that's used in the marketing to better understand the cost for clicks or views. So basically it's just how you can manage to understand the cost for a click, because when you go into big populations, we want to calculate it by million, because it's easier to understand on a bigger scale. Else you end up with a cost of 0.0000001 cent, and that's why they use this. I use CPC, which is cost per click, because I have smaller audiences, so I can see the cost for one click for one person to convert onto my web page or onto whatever content I want them to see. It could be on Facebook or anything. So CPC would be a cost per click. So when I say that it costs 20 cents, it means that my ad, if I wanted people to go and look up the delivery service, which is what we were selling, it would cost me between 18 to 28 cents to get that click. And it would used to cost me 56 cents to $1.64 in the past. Does that make more sense?
So the first range is the new range.
Yes, correct. So I didn't spend too much time on this because I know numbers are boring. I'm not a big fan of staying on numbers for too long, so we'll go as fast as possible in them. I'm just making sure that it's out there, that you know that it exists, if it's something that's useful to you. So one thing that was also useful to note in those, presentations is that the popular topics at the moment for people, what they look for is entertainment, recreational stuff, lifestyle, and social gathering. So that's something that's important, because as you will be talking on your as you'll be talking to people on your social medias, focusing on the buckets that people are looking for are going to make your posts a lot more attractive to people, right? Good. Any more questions? All right, moving on. I wanted to give you a little bit more of more numbers about what it means. What you can see in front of you right now is results that I've been pulling out of our company, the Trois Brassards I was telling you about, the microbrewery. Within, year on year, from March 1st to May 20th, we've been able to register 391% increase in engagement, although we've stopped investment completely, which means we've been able, by understanding the situation and by reaching out to people for what really matters to them, we've been able to increase our engagement a lot, even though we spent no money compared to last year. A lot more shares, more fans, a lot more fans, like out of the blue for like almost 2-month period. Same thing on Instagram. So I just wanted to let you know before we move on that I've been testing this, and it actually works to better understand your customer and to adapt into what he's going through right now. So I think that's pretty much it for numbers, because as I said, I want to stay there for too long. Case in point, it works. And basically what you should understand right now is that it costs less to advertise if ever you want to advertise using money. Good. So if we go back to that slide that we were before, I'd like to give a little bit more of a narrative line. So when you're talking on your social media content, you want to be able to match what you're saying in terms of emotion to what people are going through and to what's happening right now, so that you sound relevant and that you can better appeal to those people. So when people are through fear, you want to be able to go through acknowledgement. When people are in doubt or anger, you want to be calm. Show that you're calm and structured, because they're looking for something stable. So if you are, or at least show that you are stable, you'll vehicle something that really rings to them. You want to show that you're moving on and that you're caring when people are into the acceptance phase, which is basically where we are right now. Moving on, caring, very important. And as we move into the fear again, you can start with the acknowledgement. But again, the moving on and caring part will be something that's going to stay for the next couple of months at least, even if there's a little bit of fear that pitches into it as we get new information about the pandemic, or at least until we get a vaccine, or whenever we get to the end of this crisis. Any questions about that? Okay, let's go into COVID fatigue. Anybody's tired of hearing about the pandemic? Yeah, I see big eyes in the videos. I can see we're all tired about it, right? So it's actually something that exists, content fatigue. Social media fatigue is created when a topic is present or omnipresent for too long. It's usually linked to stress. It becomes stressful to see that all the time, and it usually happens when the influencers are tired. So influencers are those, they're called like this because they basically take, most important or the topic of the hour that's introduced, share it into the world to their own sauce. They share it whatever way they want, and it usually reaches the general public. People copy it, interact with it, creates its golden age for the content, and eventually it gets old and people get tired of it. This is where the fatigue is present, because we are stuck at that stage right now. The pandemic is a long-term and massive topic, which means we're going to be stuck there for a little while. So that's why this is such a challenge right now, because the influencers are looking for stuff to say, but there's hardly anything to say because they're usually based on news, and news only talks about this crap, right? The pandemic all the time. There's a way to get out of it. Anybody has questions?
For those creating video ads, an article worth a read as well.
Thank you, Kristen, for sharing that. So if you want to look it up, she shared a link for, I think, how to create videos for ads that, attract more. So very interesting if you want to start using that to, stay relevant into the mental map. So moving on into the next slide here.
Instant bias toward actions during the COVID washing.
Interesting. Excellent. So just a quick example of what content fatigue is that probably looks somewhat like your feed right now on Facebook, which is basically a bunch of stuff about fatigue, different political sides and stuff like that, information left and right. So basically what you can see in the middle is a post that I've seen that was through my feed that, popped up a little bit more, because basically it's something else. It's just different. And it will stand out a lot more naturally than it used to do in the past, because the subjects are scarce, the other subjects that don't touch the topic. I wanted to draw a parallel here with the dancing world, because right now, most of what we hear is solo dance classes, meme about COVID, event canceled, solo dance classes. So it's usually always the same thing. So it's creating that same level of fatigue online, which is kind of dangerous for our dance world because people get tired of it. So what we'll be discussing next is what do we need to talk about to kick that, to kickstart that back into a healthier chain of feeds. So as you look into that presentation, try to think about that thing that you can talk about that's not necessarily directly related to it. Good? Any questions? Let's move on. The new normal. Yes, the buzzword. So, oh, someone's mentioning something.
And you forgot everybody trying to make bread.
Yeah, but the bread is not necessarily a direct thing. It's not linked to the fatigue. It's not something negative that's coming out of it. It's people trying food. It's more part of the new normal. It's people are trying something different. They might have found something they're good at, and that's something positive to look upon. So I'd rather see posts about bread than see posts about the pandemic. Also, people that post about bread, not talking about UK, but people are getting very, they're getting innovative. So they're trying new recipes and stuff like that. I'm actually talking about UK. So that's good stuff. That's something that we want to see more on social media. So we'll get into this a little bit more. So, yes.
Ben, I would accept a new house bread post all day, every day.
So see that? See, that's what I mean. People like to see that content. So just keep that in the back of your mind. We'll talk about how we can create that feeling of interest for also brands, not only like for people. So that new normal buzzword, if we look at the steps we were looking at before, assessment, sensitization, and habits, I'd like to introduce Karen. Again, not pointing at anyone, it's just a character I created. Karen is in the assessment part. She's on standby, no long-term engagement, doesn't know what's gonna happen in the future. Then a pandemic shows up and we need to move into the sensitization of part of it, becomes real, and it's an unstable moment. She has to realign to the new reality, and it's a moment where her attention is focused on her house. And then eventually Karen gets used to it, gets her mask, gets ready to face, and gets back to a normal state of mind. So that's what I want to, to point out. What the new normal is when normal, when the feeling, the general feeling is a stable state of mind. It's nothing else. It's not specific contents. It's basically just talking about the regular stuff because we're back into a place in our mind where we are in our normal. We call it the new normal because it takes new aspect of that the pandemic brought to us, right? And it puts it into a relative normality, which is more of a comfort zone than an actual new normal. So basically people rebuild their habits around the factors that are affecting them, and it creates that new normal where basically I'm comfortable again, right? Not 100% comfortable, but comfortable enough to start thinking about, dancing or and stuff like that. So people are asking more and more what's happening with the dance world because they are ready to start moving back into it. So that means your organization has to find its normal that will go around the factors. Very important element here. What you need to find for your organization is what your new normal is, what it means for your organization to be part of that new world, so that you're not in the older scheme where people think that, see your event or you as something from the past that didn't necessarily evolve to that new normal, but something that's part of it. Sounds simple. We'll get back to that in the second part where we build our strategy around it. So if someone talks about the new normal, what you should hear is it's just a stable state of mind. Sounds good? I hope that's helpful. That's been helpful for me to better understand that it's just a mindset. Sounds good? Any questions about that? So let's look at the dancer's mental map before the pandemic. So this is Tyler. I like to create personas, as you can see. Tyler, you can see he's dressed in black, which means he's probably an advanced dancer. Who knows? Most probably. So before the pandemic, the values and principles of Tyler were the events has to be within. I based this more upon like Canadian side of it, but you can always you have your own personas. The event has to be within 6 hours of driving, under $400 or $7,000 in Canadian dollars. You'd need to have interesting prose to some extent, a good social dancing, and a lot of social interactions. I want to make sure we hear that, social interactions. This is what most of the dancers are looking for. They're not looking for classes, they're looking for social interactions, and classes just happen to appear in that world because it can get better at something, but the social interaction is what we all have in common. Just very important element that we need to keep into our focus for the rest of the presentation. All right, so let's look at Tyler's mental map after the pandemic. Tyler now wants to dance anywhere within the surface of Earth because he needs to dance. It's been a while. At least 25 people. He doesn't care anymore if it's 1,000, 800, 250. He just wants to dance, right? Safety. It's in bold in there. Safety is going to be a big topic in the next slides. He needs to feel that he's safe. He needs to find social interactions, which we already talked about. He needs to see a solid organization because he wants to commit to an event, but he needs to see a solid structure and organization to be able to commit. For people to buy passes right now, especially in the uncertain future, solid organizations is what you need to display for people to trust you. And of course, since a lot of people lost their jobs, they need it to be as cheap as possible, which is a no-brainer, and that's going to be a big challenge to figure out that level between what you need to charge and what people can afford. This is just the laws of the market. Any questions so far about Tyler or?
Tyler is in
Are we?
Wait.
What do you mean? You guys like Tyler?
Looks like he has to take a bathroom break. Love Tyler.
No, I like the footwork personally. I'll try that move next time we can compete.
Hashtag I am Tyler.
There you go. So whenever we get back to dancing, whenever I get to compete again, I'm going to try and do this. And if you know what that is, I want to hear you clapping. All right. Let's make this interesting. Good. Moving on to the next part, the branding and rebranding. Authenticity is going to be something that's very important here. What do I mean by that? You can't jump into the posting and start interacting with people again on your events or organizations if you're not authentic about your posts. And to be authentic, it has to be part of your brand. If you just throw something out there because that's what people want to hear, but your base, your backbone is not geared towards it, people understand it. If you want to say that you're safe, but you've displayed no safety measures, people won't buy it. So that's why it's very important to consider. Before, let's say your core values, of course, before we move into that, your brand is usually the basics of the branding, core values, core mission, basic social media guidelines, and circumstantial elements that you want to take into consideration. So if you have any questions about this, is more, basic branding stuff, we can always have a discussion about it, or you can reach out to me in private so I can get into more depth about this. But basically, your core values before could have been something like fun, smooth, because we want events to run smooth, for instance, and inclusion-oriented event, which is usually the basics that dance events have. Your core mission could be providing a stellar dance experience in a welcoming environment, run the smoothest event possible within staff comfort zone, and differentiate and make sure that you have your differentiating factor in there, which all the, most events have, where you can recognize them with the, a simple thing, just like Swinglebell or Michigan Swing Classic, or all of those events that have a very strong brand. Usually it's because they have a differentiating factor. Guidelines, usually no political posts, having consent on images, but those are just examples that we usually use in the marketing world. And before the pandemic, the circumstantial was all good. There was nothing really impacting us, aside maybe from regular posting from too many events and stuff like that. It was becoming hard to find a way to differentiate yourself, but that was the biggest problem we had back then. Wish we were back in that time, but Questions, comments?
Kristen Shaw.
What did she say?
She put Tyler on her Facebook profile.
Okay, you're making me laugh. All right, good. Let's move on. So after the pandemic, our core values will probably stay the same because it didn't change our whole event. It's just changing one aspect of it. We want to stay fun, smooth, and inclusion-oriented, but we want to get that safety part of our core values because that's what people will be looking for. Very important, I have to repeat there. People will be looking for safety before everything in the future. We should be talking about this. We should all align somehow to some level to those safety procedures. We'll look at that a little bit later, but safety is part of it. So our core mission won't change that much again. Providing a stellar dance experience in a welcoming, safe environment, run the smoothest event possible. See, the only difference is that we include that safety in there. And then in the guideline, same thing, no political posts, use image with consent, avoid empty COVID content would become one of the guidelines because we want to avoid to fall into that fatigue again. And safety would have to be implied in most posts. And then the circumstantial, very important. I need everybody's attention here. What is your brand doing for me in the pandemic is a question that's happening a lot more in people's mind right now. What is your added value into the pandemic? Keep that in your mind. That's going to be a very important thing. People look for your added value. This is not an easy question, but this is something that people are looking for. So it's worth taking some time to regroup with your teams and make sure that we all understand together that, our brands is doing this for people, and that's what people want and need, not the opposite. The event is not there. Dancers are not there for the events are there for dancers. Same thing for classes, same thing for dance professionals, same thing for local dances. We have to make sure we keep that in mind, because if we can't convey that in our social medias, you know, the mental map position will drop. Sounds good? Yes. Yes.
What is your brand doing for me equals do you care about me?
Exactly. Exactly. Well said. So that's a very important aspect. Whenever you're building content, it was already relevant before, but today people need to know what you're bringing to them, because they don't have that many choices for events and stuff anymore. It's going to be more scarce. Activities, options are more limited, so they have to choose more wisely. Budgets are different. So that's why what your brand is doing for me is important. A good example of that is people are looking for local, they want to invest into things that are local stores, local restaurants, because they feel like, you know, they're helping a bigger cause by helping the local people instead of helping the corporations. You know what I mean? So this is just a concrete example of what it means for what your brand is doing for me. Thanks for the comment. Moving on to the next thing. We're almost done with the first part. So what's scary about this, and this is why you're all here with me right now, it's that transition between the before and the after. How do I make that efficiently without pissing off a bunch of people? That's a good question. What you guys need to know is that there will be some friction at first, because you'll be implanting new things. Your tone about it and how serious you are about changing this and making it part of your core value is going to be very important to making this a seamless transition. And if we can do this as a community, all the community leaders that are sitting down right now in that room, you need to hear this. It's very important. If we can create that community feeling that we're all moving together towards a safe dance environment, we're going to be able to keep our dance world active, and we're going to be able to get back to dancing so much faster. Instead of all being on our own train, trying to do our own thing, and then people have to choose who's safe and who's not, and then the customer is going to decide what's safe. And we don't want that to happen. We want to be to the highest standard as a community, show it to people, and show them this is what's happening to us as a community, right? I hope that that point was clear enough. I said I was going to red flag stuff. This is a very important one. Sounds good? Any questions? All right. So a little content cheat sheet. Update your brand not to sound detached. I think we understand that now. Updating your brand to that new reality. Start posting again. Now it's time. People are ready. They can take it. To start working on the mental map of your events and your brand. Keep the dancer's need in mind. Use the new normal to stay fresh, which is basically just any old content, because the new normal is still just normal, right? So you can start posting regularly again. Just make sure you keep that safety in the back of your mind. Usually it's just one word in a post that will make that difference. And yeah, you can start posting the regular old memes. It's time. I want to see the old memes. Good. So community movement, I think that was clear from the previous statement, is what's going to help us get that done. So little break time. I think we could take 5 minutes. I want you guys to get up from your seat for a minute. Pee break, go for a smoke break. Just take some time to move for a minute, because I want to make sure we get into a new subject, and I don't want this to be too much of an influence on what we're doing, right? So take a minute. I'll go and drink some water because I can't swallow anymore, and we'll be right back. So 5 minutes, which means 4:05. See you in a bit, guys.